All right, welcome everyone. I'm Laura. If you don't know me.
Yeah.
And we'll get started. Tonight we have Mandy here speaking about Varroa biology and management. We'll have some words from Dewey as well. And if we have time, we might even learn a little bit about yellow jackets from Brian. So we will see.
Oh, I guess.
Perfect. All right. So if you're not a member already, is there anyone that is new to beekeeping? Yes. All right. We got some new people. If you're not a member already, being a Portland Urban Beekeeper member is awesome because not only do you get access to the swarm list, we have a bee buddy map where you can get linked up with someone that lives close to you that can kind of mentor you through your beekeeping. We have an apiary that you can go to and learn, get some hands-on skills. We have library books, candle molds, DVDs in case you have a DVD player. And there's equipment as well, like extractors, refractometer, all sorts of stuff. So it's $25 and I recommend it.
Oops.
All right, so we're gonna go through our things that happened in February. So behind the scenes, all sorts of stuff goes on. I actually didn't know this until I became a board member. First, at the apiary, we had our first apiary day. I think it was just this past Sunday. And 26 people showed up. Some were new, but a lot of people, or some were old, but a lot of people were new. And Jana's really excited about this year. So if you haven't gone, there's another slide on it that you learn more about it. Susie taught bee school to 29 future beekeepers at Taper Space. So that's really awesome. And it looks like maybe we have some of those beekeepers here. And then presentations around town. Susie also presented to a kindergarten first grade class at the Emerson Charter School. And the kids knew a lot about bees. And it sounds like it was a really awesome time, which is great. And then Brian Fackler presented to the Olympia beekeepers on nosema and yellow jackets, and to the Portland Metro beekeepers on bee sting allergies. Over at Blanchet Farms, so we have kind of a partnership with Blanchet Farms. We have some hives out there. And Katie and Brian all represented us at the Lend a Helping Hand brunch to benefit Blanchet House. And then Susie also went out to the farm, and there are some residents that live at the farm that Susie taught a beekeeping class to. And those residents are the ones that help with the hives as well at the farm. And if you were at our honey tasting, there the Blanchet Farm hive honey is what actually won our honey tasting. It's kind of exciting, full circles coming around. So just some more pictures from the farm and from the brunch. Gather and Blather, if you haven't attended it, it is at the Paladin Lane. It's on Northeast Fremont, kind of in the 50th area of Northeast Fremont. It's a really cool place. These are all like board games. So even if you don't come to Gather and Blather, maybe go check it out if you're into board games. But it was a really great time, and it happens on Saturdays. It's on the calendar on top. Upcoming, that Gather and Blather is March 29th. We have our next apiary day in St. John's on the 16th. And then next month's meeting, we'll have Judy Scher talk about spring management, and I think Dewey will be back as well to talk about the honeybee survey. There's a queen rearing class that Jana is going to put on, and that starts May 8th. That will start with just a Zoom presentation, and everyone can join. There can be an unlimited number of people, and she'll just present about queen rearing. And then there will be 3 kind of smaller days, limited to 12 people. The first will be May 15th, and that's some practical experience with queen rearing. May 17th, she'll be doing grafting. And then May 27th will be a queen cell pickup day. And I'm assuming those May 15th, 17th, and 27th will happen at the apiary. So our hands-on learning apiary is located in St. John's. It's actually a really beautiful location. It's on the river. If you've never been there, you actually go to the, you can park at the boat ramp, although you have to pay now. Or you can kind of park up in the neighborhood, walk down to the boat ramp, and then you walk into this area called Green Acres. And there are tons of hives down there. Happens the first and third Sundays from 11 to 1. It's just a really cool place. You get to meet a lot of beekeepers, you open hives, ask questions. It's a great way to build some community, get to know people, and get some experience all at the same time. Susie, I didn't actually check. Do we still need volunteers for this? Okay, perfect.
Like one more person.
All right, so we need one more volunteer to help staff a pub table at the Arletta Elementary STEM event. I am actually a teacher, else I would love to go. I'm not available because it's from 2:30 to 4:30 on Friday the 18th. But April 18th, that is, so next month. I will say kids really do love these. So if you do staff that table, it'll probably be a lot of fun conversations, a lot of excitement. And Susie has all sorts of items that you can like share with the children for the table. All right. Are there any questions?
There is somebody that's gonna help at that
Okay.
event, but it's always more fun if you have two people at a table, so you have something to chat with. And the guy that's doing it is really nice.
Right.
Can you go back to the first slide, because you went past it really fast?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's got lost.
Let me,
No worries.
The March one.
The March events. So
I think it was 4 slides back.
Okay.
1, 2,
That
3. One more.
one more.
There it is.
The dates.
Thank you.
All of these dates too are on the calendar on the club website, which is back up and running smoothly. If anyone had any issues. Cool. Right, we can leave that up, and I think Dewey wanted to get up. This is my favorite.
Thank you. I'll talk a little bit next time about the loss survey, but I wanted to alert you to the annual survey that I've been doing. This will be the 16th year. So if you had colonies in the fall and you attempted to overwinter, it's a survey of the level of losses of overwintering colonies. Last year, I just pulled it up. Last year, for the members that submitted a survey, there was a 14% level of loss by pup, the lowest that it's ever been. And that contrasts with 4 years before there, where the loss level for members of this group was 62%. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at your colonies yet, but basically it's going to be asking for how many you had in the fall and then how many have survived until the spring. It is also a management survey, but this year I've got a good 10 years of management details in the survey, and I've started a deep analysis of that. So this year I have an option for fast track, and that means you would not have to enter any of the information about what you did about mites, what feeding, overwintering managements, those type of things. You can just skip through all of those. And basically it would be then just the survivorship or the loss survey that's in the beginning. So if you had colonies and you overwintered, I'd appreciate again. This survey is hosted by this club, by our web server for this club, but it includes all of the beekeepers of the 3 different categories: backyard up to 50 colonies, more than 50 colonies for commercial, and that's also built into it's an electronic survey. The address is pnwhoneybeesurvey.com. pnwhoneybeesurvey.com. Now, I'll come back next month and talk a little bit about some of what's happened in the past in terms of the survey, why we think there were such a and sideline beekeepers, but we don't have as many numbers and
while he's getting all that set up. My name is Mandy. I've been with Portland Urban Beekeepers since I started with bees in 2016. I've done a lot over the years, but I always think of Portland Urban as my home bee club, my Ohana bee club. So it's always a treat when I get invited to come and share with you guys. Are we good to go, Brian?
Yep, you're
Okay.
back.
Awesome. So integrated pest management is really, it's one of the trickier aspects of beekeeping, but it also is one of the pillars of strong colony management. And, I'll just share with you. Oh,
Oh, you go.
okay, there you go. So if your aim is to be a sustainable beekeeper and the goal is to grow your operation and avoid having to replace losses every year, it's really important to have a strong handle on your integrative pest management. And when we look at all of the pieces that go into honeybee health, pest management is one of the 3 most popular methods. So every beehive has Varroa. Every beehive will experience some kind of pest pressure at one time or another. And when we look at the philosophies of treatment free, treatment minimal, conventional management, we can find our own comfort zone and all of that, but it's really important, in my opinion, to understand each of those perspectives and find the way where you're not overdosing your colonies, but also giving them the support that they need when they need it. There are lots of natural ways to help mitigate Varroa. There's lots of great resources out there on how to apply different treatments. So really, this is just an overview of some of those resources. What's my battery not working? Okay. So there's different ways that Varroa can impact your colonies. Ultimately, it can lead to their demise. Losing a colony to Varroa is pretty devastating. It's really common, unfortunately. But not only does it can cause your colony to die at the end of the season, but during the season, it can impact your honey crops. It can impact the health of your queens. It can spread viruses to your neighboring colonies. And so when we think about Varroa, we have to think about how they reproduce. And this is where it gets to be incredibly challenging to keep up with them, because their biology, they grow their brood in honeybee brood. And so it becomes, it's not only hard to see with the native information you already know. So 1 to 2 years. Varroa mite is a parasite that feeds off of the honeybees' bodies. And when they're doing that, they are weakening the honeybees' immune systems and also making the bees more susceptible to viruses. So they're a transmitter of different viruses. The way that the Varroa reproduce is in the brood cells. So a pregnant Varroa mite can go into a cell before it's capped. So they can sense when the larva is at a certain age. They climb down into the cell, and when that cell gets capped over, that's when the Varroa mite lays their eggs, and their offspring will reproduce with each other before that bee emerges as an adult bee. So one mite goes in, 4 can come out. And so it's really important to be aware of that cycle, especially, you know, right now our colonies are just starting to grow, just starting to have brood. And if you can mitigate the season, you're going to have an easier time later on. Now, the timing of all of this is important because worker bee is 21 days to go from egg to adult bee. Whereas a drone, how many days is a drone? It's a little bit longer. So those extra days gives the mites more time to reproduce. So right now, our colonies haven't really started making drone brood yet, but they are going to in the next few weeks. And so when we have lots of drone brood, it's more opportunity for the mites to grow in your colonies.
How about I advance for you?
Okay. So here's a little video. That's a Varroa mite down in a cell. And what they do is, you know, when they're in the cell with the pupating bee, it causes damage to the bee's body. So they can come out with deformed wings, they can come out with stunted abdomens. And it's just not a good situation. And this was just taken with, I just have a little entomology microscope. So if you ever want to do something like that, you can get a microscope for really inexpensive. It's fun to see these things up close because it just gives you a better understanding of who your enemy is.
Fun.
Did I hear someone say cute?
I did say that.
Oh man. Okay, okay. So when we're looking for Varroa in our colonies, over the last 10 years, I've heard a lot of newer beekeepers say they do visual inspections on their hives to look for Varroa. It's not reliable because the Varroa are not primarily on the backs of the bees. They're on the abdomens where they're feeding. So we can't just go through and pick up our bees one by one and look at them. Really, the most dependable methods to check your colony to see how many mites are in it is going to be doing an alcohol wash or a sugar shake. It's taking a sample of about 300 bees. Think of it as a blood draw. If we are testing ourselves for certain illnesses, we go and we get a blood draw. This sample size from your colony of 30,000+ bees is a very small sacrifice to get an overall evaluation on what could become a problem for your bees. So screen bottom board inserts are great, but that's not the most effective way to check. It's a way to monitor what debris is falling and what mites might be falling, but it's not a true test of what your actual Varroa level is. And of course, if you're looking at the brood, you can see signs of a Varroa infestation. So if the brood pattern, what we want to see is something nice and compact and even. If that starts to break apart and become really sort of scattered, if you start seeing a lot of brood where the cappings have been chewed down and you see the pupating bees with their eyes sticking out, that means that the nurse bees have interrupted their pupation cycle because they detect there's something wrong there. And so that's the bee's way of trying to correct the problem. And then of course, seeing bees born with deformed wings. That bee will never be able to contribute to the colony. They'll never be able to forage, and they will literally just crawl away from the colony and die. So some of the ways that we can mitigate the Varroa's acceleration, in the springtime, we have swarming, we have brood breaks, we can make splits, and all of those things create an interruption in the brood cycle. So any interruption to the brood cycle sort of halts and slows down the Varroa brood cycle. You can also call the drone brood. So you can do that with honey uncapping fork. You can use green drone brood frames, and basically those are encouraging the bees to draw out the comb that's the appropriate size for drones. All the drones get laid up in there and the mites detect them and go in. And when those cells get capped off, you take the frame out, pop it in the freezer to kill all the pupa, and you can put it back in the hive. So in that way, you're sort of naturally knocking down the mite numbers. There's treatments available. Apivar is a synthetic treatment, and it has shown some signs of mite resistance. It's not my favorite treatment. It's easy to apply, but I haven't found it to be very effective. And then organic treatments would be formic acid, oxalic acid, heartburn, and thymol. My two favorites on the list are oxalic and thymol, but you can find what works for you. So this is a way to do an alcohol wash. When I do it, I take the frame away from the hive because when you're getting your sample, the bees might make some of their alarm pheromone smell. And I try to not upset the whole hive itself. So I will take the frame away, maybe 4 or 5 feet, get my sample. And then before I put the frame back in the hive, I'll just smoke it a little bit and then put it back in. This type of Varroa testing washer is really nice because it allows you to, you can rewash these if you want. Like if you're not so sure that you got, you know, good enough sample, you can just keep them in there for a long time and sort of agitating them. And you can also use windshield wiper fluid. You can use a little bit of soapy water. Don't have any rubbing alcohol. Any questions so far?
What is thymol? Which the Apigard?
Yeah, so it's called Apigard, and it's made with thymol or thyme oil derived from the thyme plant. And so it's basically a little tray that has the dose in it, and the thymol oil is mixed in with this sort of gel-like substance, and you put it in the hive, and it does make the whole thing smell like Listerine, so you don't want to use it when you have supers on because that's going to taint the flavor of the honey. But the bees will start to remove it from the hive. And I think it's that action of it getting spread throughout the hive and on their bodies that helps knock off any of the mites that they have on them. And that's how oxalic acid works also. It sort of sloughs the mites off of their body when they come into contact with it. So it's not getting under the cappings. That's where a treatment like Formic Pro, that's kind of its highest bragging right is that's a treatment that actually can get under the cappings and kill mites that are in the pupa. So this is an early stage of a Varroa infestation. You can see how what once was a nice solid brood pattern is starting to break up. If you see this and you test your colony, you probably still have time to turn things around depending on where you're at in the season. But if you don't act and you see these signs, this is the end result if the bees are left to deal with this on their own. And nobody wants to find out. So this is the example of some deformed bean viruses. You can see that this bee wasn't even born alive. So nurse bees will actually go through and remove dead infected pupa that they find. You can see their tongue is sticking out, their wings are all shriveled up, and then that's that stunted abdomen that I was talking about. And you can see on the bottom board, post-treatment, this hive had a really significant Varroa infestation. So those are all mites that fall off of bee bodies. Another virus is there's chronic and acute bee paralysis virus. So this was a swarm that I caught 2 years ago, and I'd never seen a colony with these kinds of symptoms before. And what you're seeing is bees with no fuzz, really. They look very shiny, and they behave a little bit differently. They kind of shake, they tremble, they look confused. And on this one here, see if we can go back. So as you see a lot of those dead bees out in front of the hive. And then what I was observing is those bees actually being pushed out of the colony and guards like not letting them back in. So the bees around them, it says those bees were not well and they were trying to clean them out.
Is this virus the result of Varroa?
Yeah.
So if you had your Varroa in check, you probably wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't, I mean, you may see it at much lower levels, but this colony, its presentation was pretty significant.
You said you caught it as a swarm. What did you do with them?
Well, they survived the winter that year. I treated them and it was.
They got rid of the virus?
They were able to get rid of the virus. So they started acting like this within a month of living in my apiary. And so, I had plenty of time left in the season. So that probably would have been before the nectar flow. So doing a treatment and then just monitoring after and then doing the treatment again in the fall. So even if your colony, you know, early in the season, I'd say pre-nectar flow, it has a really high, you know, Varroa count, you still have a lot of time to get it back down and get them healthy for winter. When it gets to be later in the season, that window of course correction gets smaller and smaller. So it's just really good to be proactive about, you know, grabbing the bull by the horns, monitoring your bees. This is one of my favorite free resources for how to deal with Varroa. Specifically, they have a decision-making tool. It is a walk you through step by step, answer their questions and their prompts, and it will take you to a series of options, and it'll just help to guide that decision-making process until you're confident in what you need to do. And it's honeybeehealthcoalition.org. That might even be on the pub website somewhere. Okay, it is good. Another thing that we can do for our bees, just to help their overall health over the years, is to cycle out the old comb. So I like to think of the beeswax as having a memory or it being like a sponge. It can absorb everything that our bees are trapping in, all of the internal elements, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, any pesticides and fungicides, insecticides that they come into contact with out in the environment can get absorbed into the comb. So ideally, you would want to cycle it out every few years. If you're only running a couple of colonies and you don't have a lot of comb to work with, you don't have to replace all the comb in your hive all at once, but just make it a habit to plan, okay, this year for my 2 hives, I'm gonna replace 5 combs. That's an attainable goal. And then you can still use the beeswax. You can still I use a solar wax melter, and then I have a second melter that I use just for the final rendering. So a few years ago, my apiary was part of the USDA's honeybee survey. And I think this is really interesting because this shows you all of the chemicals that were found in beeswax in my apiaries. So this proves that when our bees go out, they pick things up on their feet and their bodies, and it gets trapped into the hive and all over the combs. So here's Thymol. So that gets absorbed into the comb. A lot of these other things are fungicides, pesticides, and not chemicals that I have used in my own yard. It's just the bees going out and coming into contact with them. And so maybe this hasn't created a high impact immediate effect on the colony, but over time, as these compounds build up in the wax, you can have more of a low grade chronic impact that at some point will, create, the colony will be weaker because of it. Yes.
What did you submit? Did you submit like the wax? or-
Yeah, so they came out, OSU Bee Lab was the ones collecting the samples. And so for the beeswax, yeah, they just took chunks of foam out of some of my hives. They also took samples of bees that they tested for virus levels, mite levels. They also took samples of open brood, because they are monitoring for Trochilelapse mite. So if you haven't heard about the big T, it's another mite that is from Southeast Asia, and it's not in the United States yet, but it's following the same trajectory that Varroa did when Varroa was spreading. Yes.
Something I never thought about, I changed out my food. What about the chemical?
I don't, I mean, if the bees aren't using it for brood and we're taking down those cappings, to do the harvest, I don't.
I never thought about it.
It's such a valuable thing. But I think it's more important for the brood area because that's where bees are doing most of their living.
I didn't see oxalic on you. Say you're using oxalic. No.
Yeah.
Oh, was it on there? I didn't notice it.
Oh, well, Thymol on this list here about what has been absorbed into the comb. I think oxalate is interesting because it crystallizes, and when it's in its powder form, it's kind of dry and can fall off. And so I don't think that it's something that can, it's not oily. Yeah, it's not something that's gonna stick so much.
It's also an organic acid, so it's gonna break down into.
Good, but can you say it just one more time?
Oh, it's a formic acid is an organic acid. It's going to decompose in carbon dioxide and water.
As opposed to a lot of these are like chemicals.
Yep.
Does it have that paper bar on it?
Yeah, at the guard.
So it's 8 paper bars.
Apivar. So on this list, I don't,
Amatraz.
is it Amatraz? What are you using that?
Amatraz isn't on there,
Okay,
but Amatraz may have a technical name. It's not Amatraz, because I think that would be really another proprietary name.
Probably. And I know that on the instructions for, that treatment, they say you need to have, I want to say off the top of my head, a 6-week period before supering. So if you're gonna use that treatment in the spring, you have to really plan for that allotment of time between the time you take the treatment off and when you can put supers on.
Like, this says total hazard.
Mhm.
13. Like, what's horrible, what's not bad.
I think overall mine weren't bad, but it's there, you know. And so here's a fresh wax just for inspiration.
So what's your insight? Sorry, 5 years?
Oh, I would say 3. If you can get away with 3, awesome. I don't let my comb get black if it's, you know, comb, it gets dark pretty quick in the brood area, but if it's black and the whole frame is black comb and those cells have sort of lost their nice hexagonal shape that they have when they're first made, it's time. It's been time for a while to take it out.
When the bees emerge, do they often emerge with the mice on them? The mice tend to scatter?
So they can come out and scatter, but if you have a really high infestation and if you go in your hive and you are seeing Varroa on the backs of the bees, then that's like, okay, there's a problem. But yeah, mostly they just will latch on. They can hop on nurse bees. And then of course the nurse bees are the newest bees in the hive, so there they are taking care of the larva. And it's a perfect system for Varroa because, you know, they've just had their babies and those babies can come out on their new host. And then when they're ready to have their own children, they can just drop right into a cell. They're just all like sort of existing in that same space together. So when I started beekeeping, everybody said Oregon does not have small hive beetle. And people believed it for a really, really long time. And then I did a cutout and it had small hive beetle. And so small hive beetle is considered an emerging pest in Oregon. The state bee lab is monitoring as best they're able to on top of all the other millions of things that they do. But they do have a process to report it if you find it in your colonies. In the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of discussions on the local Facebook groups for beekeepers here. More and more people are seeing small hive beetles in their colonies. Not to the point where they're destroying, because what small hive beetles can do is they lay their eggs and the larva, when it hatches, there's some sort of reaction with the yeast in their bodies and the comb, and they just create this slime. And so when it gets to that slime stage, the honey is not safe for humans. The bees are already, if it gets to this point, the bees are starting to lose the hive beetle battle. This was in the cutout that I did. Since then, I've had small hive beetle in my apiary, but I've never had it get to this point where they've done the sliming. I'll see 4 or 5 here and there. I smash them when I see them, but I also use these beetle jail traps. And I brought this because this trap is really pretty cool. It has a spot in here where you can put bait. So for bait, you can use some balsamic vinegar or red wine vinegar or a little bit of pollen patty. You can close that up. And then in these little chambers here, you just pour some oil and then you close it up. And sorry. When you put this in the hive, so this goes in the upper box that you have in the corner, so this is gonna rest flush with the side of the box. And then this just rests on top of the frame. These little things there. And so the bees, in their attempt to manage these beetles, they'll try to corner them and they'll build little propolis jails for them to try and keep them in one spot. Well, this just makes their life a little bit easier. So the bees can sort of corral the hive beetles into one corner. The beetles are already going to be attracted to the smell of the bait. And then they just climb in these little slots and then they drown in the oil. This is really easy to clean out, reuse, and track how many hive beetles you catch. And they're pretty inexpensive, about $1 a piece. So I got a pack on Amazon, like 15. And yeah, they're great. This has been my favorite method of catching and controlling hive beetles.
What percentage of your hives have hive bees?
All of
Took the
them.
cover
All
off
of
this
them.
year and saw 'em.
Yeah, and every hive that I got into last summer that wasn't my own also had them. So I just think, people are buying bees that are coming from colonies that were down in California. They have hive beetles down there. These are bees from, all over the place. And so they're being sold and distributed to obvious beekeepers. And so, yeah, it's no wonder something like that can spread and sort of get itself established. But the real trick with controlling hive beetles and just in general is to keep your colony tight in their space, because if they can't monitor and patrol and keep control over their entire house, then these things can get out of control. So here's a little more on the hive beetle. Wax moth larvae and small hive beetle larvae, when they're really small, they look very similar. So this is available on the Oregon State University Bee Lab website. It's also on the Oregon State Beekeepers Association website. It's just a good graphic. So if you're ever not sure, you see some weird larva on your bottom board, if you're not sure if it's hive beetle or wax moth, you can do that, or you can take a picture and send it to the Bee Lab, send it to me, I can look at it for you.
There's a question, what's the small beetle trap called? So they
This
can look
one
it up.
is the beetle jail.
Is it safe to say you can't eradicate?
I would say that. Yeah. Yes.
So I used traps years ago. But the bees would fertilize them down
Yeah.
and they were flimsy and it's really hard to get them off of the top of the frame without the oil spilling, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
So are these better because they're up higher?
So I have had certain colonies that love their propolis. They have gone in and immediately covered up the little openings. And I just go in with my hive tool and try and clear it out. As far as prying it out, these are pretty sturdy. They're a lot sturdier. Are you talking about like the black gutter type one? Yeah. And you don't have to put that much oil in these either. Just enough for the beetle to get caught in it. But yeah, these do just fine getting tried out with the tool, with the hive tool, and there's lots of proteins on it. Yeah. Hello. Yellow jackets, Brian's gonna talk about those. And then of course, honeybees can be their own pesty neighbor. Fall is really the worst time for honeybees going in and robbing from weak colonies. This is where looking at the bottom board is really helpful, because you can see bee legs, bee wings, obviously signs of fighting, and then torn cappings. from capped honey. So this is the bottom board from a hive that's getting bombed out. Mice, it's a real problem in the winter time. So using mouse guards can help, because if a mouse moves into the hive, not only is it nasty, but they will chew up the frame. So woodenware that you have in there, they'll chew it up. If there's comb, they'll chew it up. And then of course they're leaving feces and urine on stuff, and it's just really unsanitary. So having mouse guards that are secured on is the easiest way to prevent that from happening. And then wax moths, I think of them as nature's cleanup crew. So wax moths can actually digest and destroy comb pretty quickly. And in nature, that's great, because when they go into a tree hive that has died out, they can clear it out, and then a new colony can move in and start fresh. So they do have a purpose, and if you leave comb, like drawn out comb in boxes in the dark, like they're all closed up, if wax moth will find them, and they don't need very much space to be able to get in. So ideally, if you have drawn combs that you are not currently using, you want to freeze them for 24 to 72 hours to kill any eggs that might be on there. And then you want to put them in a sealed container, like very tightly sealed, just to keep that from happening. But if you're seeing wax moths in your active hive and they are starting to leave their little webby trail of destruction, that means that your bees have too much space, and you need to condense it a little bit so they can do a better job at patrolling.
And what's your strategy? What's your boxing up and seal up?
I haven't done that. Really? Too wet snow? Yeah. Well, another way that you can do it is have the boxes with the frames in them up on their sides so light can pass through. If there's light, the wax moths are a lot less likely to get established. So, that would be another thing that you could try. You could have them outside, you have a sunny side of the house that's protected from the elements. You can just stack up your boxes there, just allow that light to pass through. You might want to put some netting over it so rodents don't find it and have themselves a comb meal. So if yes. Oh, yeah.
So if you had some frames that were drawn out, to be able to store it, like,
well, yeah, I mean, you could put them in a bag and then, there are, like wax moth mothballs that you can get that are allegedly safe to store your combs in. So, that might be a product that you would want to try if they're going to be stored for that long. But then at the same time, like, I mean, how many frames are you talking?
10 or super, 10.
Do they have pollen in them?
No.
Okay,
They've been not been.
yeah. Well, they're probably fine, because the wax moths, they like the pollen. So if you have pollen on those frames, you're more likely to go for them. So really, I mean, a lot of beekeeping is trial and error, right? So you can just try, having them sealed up and then see if they're okay. And if not, I mean, it's not like hundreds of frames that you're dealing with. So getting that number of frames redrawn out is not the worst thing if you had to.
Experience of somebody who shall remain unnamed, but several years ago, I was going to say something, but no, I didn't have room in the freezer, so I didn't bother to freeze them. put them in a plastic bag and tied them up at the top, and put them in a dark storage unit. Next spring, they're just all over my storage unit, all over my camping gear, and it was a mess. Barbecue and camping gear and sleeping bag, lawn
Oh
chairs.
my
and,
gosh,
they were all over everything.
Alfred Hitchcock level horror.
It was.
I think my battery must be getting ready to give out on this thing. Okay, so brood breaks are a great way to naturally control Varroa. So when you catch a swarm, they are leaving the hive, and that hive behind has a brood break. So there's an interruption in the brood rearing cycle, which means an interruption in the Varroa cycle. So when you catch a swarm, those bees are going to have some Varroa on them, and depending the mated queen, and you have raw comb to give them. You're gonna have about a week to capture all the phoretic mites, all the mites that are on their body, before any. It's just gonna make all the mites on those bee bodies fall off. And if they don't have any capped brood, that'll take care of any Varroa that are lurking in the cells.
And you also, they're, put them in a hide body and then they've been in there for maybe a few days. Can you do a dribble?
Sure.
Or something if you didn't have an oxalic acid?
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have a vaporizer, you can use the dribble method, which is just mixing the oxalic acid with a sugar solution. You can find instructions to do that online, so you can get the correct ratio and the right amount to put on them. So yeah, that's another way to apply it. And then you can think of it as those bees really getting a fresh start. Another method that's popular is caging the queen. There's a beekeeper here in Oregon that designed these frames that have a nice queen cage built into them. So your queen can still move around on the frame itself and her attendants can care for her, but it limits her ability to lay across many frames. So it's reducing the amount of brood in the hive, which will reduce the number of Varroa. So good nutrition is really important for all of these, things that we just talked about, because at the end of the day, if your bees are weak because they don't have enough food to eat and enough good food to eat, their bodies aren't going to be able to fight off some of these viruses. They're not going to have the energy to deal with these problems. And so making sure when we are in a dearth, a period where there's not a lot of food available for the bees, or if foraging conditions are really bad, if it's raining a lot, providing them with some food just to help them get by, will really, give them an advantage. March is sort of a scary month for bees and beekeepers because they've survived the winter, and we're in this period between them coming out of their winter mode and starting to grow. But during this growth phase, as they're having a lot of mouths to feed, they're also burning through their food resources that they stored up from last year. Meanwhile, forage is just becoming to be available, but we're also having really dodgy weather. So we might have 60 degrees, this week, and next week we'll be down in the 40s. These ups and downs are really, really stressful for our bees. So it's important now to check their food stores. Even if you can't get in, you can lift your hive and see if it's really heavy or not. It never hurts to put a little bit of dry sugar on top of the inner cover, and then you can get an idea of if they're going for it, then they're probably hungry. So on nice days, like we've had some pretty decent days. And this week, gonna have some more days where it'll actually be okay to open your hive briefly, just to get an idea of how much food they have. I've gotten into a few of my hives. One of them was on the edge of starvation, and so I started feeding them right away. And then others, they're definitely having full frames of open brood. So the season is upon us, but losing a calling bee to starvation at the beginning of the bee season is really a terrible feeling. So it's easily preventable with some dry sugar, a pollen patty if you have it, and then once our daytime temperatures are consistently, in the 60s, and nighttime it's not getting too cold, you can start feeding syrup. And then allowing your bees to have propolis in their hive. I know it can make it hard to like remove frames and move them around and stuff, but that propolis is their medicine. They work really hard for it. And I find the colonies that I allow to have lots of propolis all over their frames, on their entrances, wherever they want to put it, except for in here. They're just so much healthier. And I think, in natural colonies, this is a tree hive that I have in my backyard. I mean, the propolis just oozing. They've encoded the entire entrance. The field of propolis is this big. And so I think it's important to pay attention to those things that they just will do naturally. So I just really encourage you guys, if you've been anti-propolis, maybe try loving propolis a little more. And then earlier I was talking about like making sure that the bees are tight in their space. And this is something that you will gain a strong intuition for over the years, understanding when your bees are overcrowded and gonna swarm, or when they have just the right amount of space and are ready to graduate to another box. So I like to see a full box of bees like that. That colony to me looks robust, healthy, they have a good command of their space, they can keep it clean, they can keep pests in check. And if you have a hive that's like this and you have a nectar flow on, it's okay to add more space. But if we don't have a nectar flow on, if it's July, I'm not going to add another box. They're not going to have the resources to fill it up. And I love this guy. I want to be like him. So I hope I don't want to discourage you by all this like blah blah Varroa talk. It's just one part of this amazing hobby, and I just really encourage you to keep coming to meetings, talking to other beekeepers, learning as much as you can, and finding ways that work for you and your bees in your apiary.
Is that a real picture?
It's a real picture.
Really?
Yeah, so he's a historian, and he was in the movie or documentary Queen of the Sun, which was the first movie that I ever saw that like pointed my heart and mind in the direction of bees. And I go back and I watch his clip from the movie, and it's just too cute. He brushes the bees with his mustache, and he just. Yeah, you have to look that up on YouTube.
doing splits, instead of doing, you know, letting your hive swarm or whatever, you just kill some of the brood.
Yeah.
And I can understand that when you've got as many hives as you want and you're done, and yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You can do the heat too. Full,
Mhm.
put it in a box. And put it in,
Yeah.
run through a cycle of that, then you ready? for it.
Yeah.
I put that in soup. Before. Yeah. I'm not fond of having my neighbors get upset.
Don't worry.
And it depends. It depends on whose house they go to. Your house.
I don't know what time it is.
Are we on time?
I don't know if people want to stay for 15 more minutes or not.
We always survey the group. You guys want to hear about Yellow Jackets?
Yes.
We're just laying it all out tonight.
Okay. You have that PowerPoint? I've got a thumb drive.
Quick question, when you're getting rid of old, how do you stagger? See if I can find it.
So it's there on the edges. These are
Did you
the
find it,
less
Brian?
ones.
Did you email it to me?
I did email it to you, but it's on this thumb drive.
So we want to.
You can plug that in. Oh. You swap that around. It's on there on Yellow Jackets.
Is it a PowerPoint?
Huh?
Is it a PowerPoint?
Yes, it's a PowerPoint. It's on that thumb drive. Find it. There it is, right here. Brian, right there,
That one? This one?
that one. Yeah, there. So. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about yellow jacket control. This is the perfect time of year to start controlling yellow jackets. And with routine maintenance on this system, you can do a pretty good job of eliminating yellow jackets. So go ahead, Brian. Can you advance it?
Yep.
Okay, you can just select them. So we're going to talk about water yellow jackets, identification, foraging, lifestyle behavior, integrated pest management, cultural controls, physical controls, chemical controls. So we're going to talk about identification of yellow jackets. We've got a good example of a honeybee and yellow jacket paper wasp here. You can, yeah. So yellow jackets, you're all familiar with them, what they are, what they look like, where they're prevalent in our area. They can get extremely aggressive and they can sting you multiple times. So go ahead. So yellow jackets forage on sugar, syrup in the form of fruit juice and tree sap. If you're out in the backyard with a gin and tonic, they'll be looking for the tonic or a Pepsi. This early in the year, besides nectar sources, they look for meat. And this is one of the keys for controlling these little pesky little devils. Oh. I guess we're, so I'm going to show you some methods of controlling them, and I'll pass this stuff around. This is a yellow jacket trap. They're from Washington State. You can just pass them around. These are cheap. They're under $10. You can get them at Home Depot, any little hardware store. But the key to these is you've got to bait them. And there's two baits. In the bottom of the trap is a cartridge. And these cartridges are good for 10 weeks. And you replace one of these every 10 weeks. Another key is in the inside of them, they have a liquid lure. And these are good for 4 weeks, I believe. And in the device, there's a cotton ball, and you can squeeze some of this stuff on the cotton ball. I find better off than the cotton ball is my wife uses the cotton pads that are like a makeup remover. I think it's a better device. So this is the traps that if you put one or two of these near your hives, you can, and keep going, Brian. You can read about this, but another key for this controlling these is insecticide. And this is the insecticide that Oregon State University recommends. It's called Onslaught. This box container will last you several years. And what I use is I get like a suet feeder for that you'd have for birds. And I go to the grocery store to the deli section and I get the greasiest drumsticks you can find. They come in a nice little plastic bag. You take one of those bait lures and squeeze it on and put a couple teaspoons of this Onslaught, squish it around and put those coated drumsticks in your suet feeder. And I replace that every month. So the yellow jacket will come to your yard, look for a meat source, chew up some of this baited greasy chicken, take it back to the hive, and that insecticide will do a good job on killing the yellow jackets in the hive. You don't have to use Onslaught. Almost any insecticide will work. Up at Olympia Beekeepers, they told me that they've been effective on using the flea medicine they put on their pets. You could use, you don't have to use you could use cat food, you could use sardines, you could anything that the yellow jackets would want to eat for bait. So you can progress along here. So if you maintain a strong, healthy colony, your chances of the bees defending themselves is great. So you, by controlling your mites, doing everything you can to have a healthy, strong population, your chance of surviving yellow jackets is increased multiple times. Go ahead. We just talked about the physical controls. I put these in about the 1st of March. Queens will be emerging soon. If you can capture a queen in the trap or bait a queen where it'll take back to your chances of eliminating the massive number of yellow jackets you're going to have is greatly reduced. So these were the chemical controls I was talking about. And I bait these things. I go from about March through, I would say, October would be a good range to do this. And it takes diligent effort on your part to put these traps out, put the bait out, and keep it baited. Go ahead. So yellow jackets are a threat to both humans and honeybees, and you can control yellow jackets with integrated pest management. And your bees will appreciate this as well as your wife and your neighbors if you can control them. Last year at this time, I would say in mid-March, in my little backyard, I caught 2 queens. You can do it. So if you got any questions, and this is my references, and go ahead, Brian. I should have brought my little deal. We could have.
It's all right.
Got
There's a question here. What does Dewey say about flea treatment for wasps?
I don't know.
Which treatment?
Flea treatment.
fipronil.
The fipronil, it's a really very toxic material. We do not recommend it to you. If you do, be very careful with any animals.
Yeah.
Cats, dogs, anything.
And I've used this method for about 10 years and I've never seen any bees attracted to my baited chicken drumsticks.
That's like a really great method because the slip feeder is where you have it hanging high off the ground, so animals aren't gonna get to it.
I haven't seen any
Yeah.
problem at all with bees, birds getting into it. And anyway, yes,
Are yellow jackets always?
what happens is in the fall, as your bee population is going down, the yellow jacket population is getting massive. Your nectar sources, we might be in a dearth situation where there's very little nectar for the hub. And those yellow jackets will love to rob your hive, get into your hive. They will kill bees and they will completely rob out a hive. And so if you have that kind of situation on your hive, you want to close your upper entrance, put your bottom entrance to the minimum size so that the guard bees have a real good chance of defending the hive. These are some of the things you can do. But if you have a strong hive with a good population of bees, you've got more bees that can defend themselves from these yellow jackets. And by you controlling those yellow jackets and minimizing the number of them, your bees have a lot higher probability of surviving. So if you had weak hives, you could combine them and make 2 weak hives and make them 1 strong hive and minimize the effect of the yellow jackets getting into the hive. So those are cultural methods you could use. You're welcome.
It
Yes,
seems,
sir.
seems that those yellow jackets are going to forage. If they're going to do that, why do you put the bait near the hive? It seems like that would attract the yellow jackets near the hives as well. Put the bait out 50 feet, 100 feet.
Well, I've got a small backyard, and so, if I had a huge area, but I want to bait these things and kill them. I don't want to be attacked in my backyard when I'm out there having a poop patio party, and I want to. So I think it would. If you had a large area, you could probably do that, but.
That OSU document that you cite points out that wasps do not forage very far from their nest. So you actually want to make sure that your bait is not so far away from the bees that it's that the bees are closer than to their nest than your bait is. So I have found 50 feet to be the perfect distance in terms of the wasps are over there and the bees are over there. And I try to get the queen in the spring.
Thank you, Diana. That was
Really good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last one, protecting honeybees from yellow jackets.
Yeah.
That one, very useful in terms of the biology.
Yeah.
A question here from Nick. Anyone know a method to keep yellow jackets from recolonizing a former yellow jacket nest in the ground?
I was up at Olympia, Washington a few weeks ago, and one of the beekeepers there had 5 acres, and he'd hired a commercial pesticide person, and they were able to vacuum the yellow jackets out of hives. I've never been involved in any of that, so I don't know. But huh? You vacuumed 2 nests up? Thank you, Richard. Okay, well, thank you.
Part of the question was answered with science, but you have to know how far they will fly. That's what I was gonna ask.
I have a vague memory of 800 meters, but we should check it,
The-
because I'm often wrong about that kind of thing.
The one thing I noticed, my neighbor, the first one I ever experienced was next to my neighbor's steps, coming up to his house,
Sure.
and they made a beeline.
I knew.
Yeah. To fly where they were going. And, I've actually used the opposite of that, find ones.
Okay.
So if you go out and you start following them, and just keep an eye on, feet underneath the beeline, you can find the nest. Yeah, so the vacuuming, use the shop vac, and you just set it next to the entrance, and start feeding them. And once you get to the point where you'll get a ton of them, then you start opening it up with the shovel.
Yeah.
You need to get that clean. Don't get that clean, if you, first time I did one, that one, within a week, it was back. And those combs were like this. Once I got down all the way to it, I tried to put them with water
How
and a little
deep,
bit of everything.
how deep was it?
Well, it was in a retaining wall at the front of the house.
Yeah.
So it was down a couple of feet. But it was actually underneath, this being plastic laid in there. So most of what I was doing wasn't actually getting to them because they were actually going in and going underneath the plastic. Yeah. To keep the rain off. So once I went all the way down into it and just literally went after the whole thing and it fixed it out.
At the house I'm living in Vancouver, when I bought it, the yard is a bit terraced. And on one side of my property, the former owner had put in almost like railroad creosoted timbers. And they'd been there for many years. And yellow jackets had gone in there and built nests. And I tried for years trying to get rid of those things. And finally in the winter, I had my gardener come and take it all out, put in a brick wall or a concrete block wall, but they're difficult to get if they have a situation like that where you can't get into it, they're difficult to get rid of.
Oh, yeah, you gotta go all the way in.
Yeah.
This one ironically had.
Yeah.
Railroad ties, walls, railroad ties.
Yeah, they were big timbers, like,
Yeah, the big piece of.
yeah, and they'd been in there for years.
Your bee suit, so you know, will not protect the yellow jacket. No, not necessarily.
I found it, you gotta tape everything up, can't have anything that.
They have I don't know whether they're fingers longer or something, but yeah.
If you have just a single layer canvas bee suit, you're kind of screwed.
And also if you wear the same suit for doing yellow jacket rules and beekeeping, understand your bee suit is gonna have yellow jacket with pheromones on it and your bees will respond accordingly.
Don't dress like that.
I have one update on the pesticide bill. Are you aware that we finally got a bill to try to ban, to change the use of neonicotinoids in the state of Oregon? A number of states have banned it. A number of states have moved neonicotinoids to a restricted use. So Zach Howland from Troutville introduced the bill in the Oregon legislature. We had the hearing this week. And unfortunately, most unfortunately, Jeff Stone, who is our arch enemy, everyone listens to him on pesticides in the state of Oregon. He's the executive director for the nursery people, and the Oregon Farm Bureau offered up a different bill. So it is not looking very good that our bill that Zach introduced was to move neonicotinoids to restricted use pesticides only. So you would have to have the pesticide training to be able to use the neonicotinoids. The alternative bill is that the Farm Bureau and the pesticide people in the state say, well, we'll just come up with a separate bill that will take the neonicotinoids out of the popular places that homeowners go to buy their pesticide. And that's likely what is going to end up being passed, unfortunately. So a lot of work we've gone into this. This has been going on for a long time to try to do something in this state about neonicotinoids. We thought we had a real good shot this year, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Now, there still probably is time. So if you have a ear of a legislator, it would not, now would be the time to try to indicate that we really need to have neonicotinoids as restricted use material.
Do you know the bill number? Maybe you could post it at some point, because if you write, you want to write with the bill number, because otherwise.
Bill
they don't
number,
know what
otherwise
you're
they don't know what's going on.
Does it have a title?
Yeah, it does, but I'll get out the number
Okay.
and the title.
Well, we have a neighbor.
Okay. So we still have some hope, but it's gonna be a tougher road.
Is it HB 2679? Is that something though?
Make sure you know.
HB 2679.
Oh, yeah.
HB 2679.
Please, let somebody collect your ballots on the way out, and you won't have to see one of these again for a while.
Yeah, I got a.
You too.